welcome back to Eye on Marvel. My name is Peter Levi, and today we are going to go through our lengthy episode 5 review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Lots to talk about there. I think there's a lot of elements from the show we can assess, even though we still have an episode to go. Before we jump into that, a reminder to like, subscribe, hit the bell, blah blah blah, YouTube algorithm, etc., etc. It's greatly appreciated. It will help news of the show to get out so people can check it out and hopefully enjoy or at least engage in the content. So I posted this review yesterday. There'll be a link for it in the description down below. And I took me a while to work my way through this one. I do like to watch an episode at least twice before voicing my opinion. I mean, I put some initial thoughts in my MCU News Digest previously, but I think a second go at it will sometimes take the shine off of something you really enjoyed, or it will add a glow, an afterglow, to something you have problems with. In this case, with episode 5, my initial impression was not strong. The second viewing did not help. And I want to go through why that is. I mentioned on Small Screen's YouTube channel that I thought this would be sort of a polarizing episode. And I meant that in terms of reception. I feel like for anyone who made it this far along in the show, that because so many character arcs are wrapped up here, this would be sort of the moment of truth. This would be, is it Ralph Boner, or is it Quicksilver? What are you getting? Does Wanda apologize to the town she's been torturing, or just Monica Rambeau, who she's barely interacted with? So I think it's a seminal moment for people interested in coherent, engaging storytelling, a well-designed plot, versus people who are interested in emotional power and in I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, but I think emotionally charged is what does work for the show. I think on an emotional level, you can say the performances here are, for the most part anyway, totally up to snuff. And the show is trying to do something interesting, very much like WandaVision, although in a different way. WandaVision was trying to be very innovative with a classic comic book story. Here, this was taking elements of different comic book stories and trying to apply them to political and social narratives of the now in a very, very watered down MCU version of it. For me personally, I don't think the things that worked landed in the way they were intended to, and I want to get into why that is. But I can certainly understand how for some people this show has really knocked it out of the park for them. I think if you're not too worried about plot niceties, character cohesion, like the nitty gritty, the bones, the spine of what keeps the story together, if you're less interested in that than what it's trying to do, I think the show is going to have worked very well for you. On the other hand, if you're like me and those noodly things actually matter a great deal, then the show unfortunately hasn't jumped the shark, but my level of enthusiasm for this show has taken a very decided downward turn. Leading in, I was very excited before it came out. I really liked the first episode. Second episode I thought was good, even though it was a step down. But then we've just been sort of doing this. So enough preamble. Let's dig into the specifics. So we'll get to Google Trends after that. So going through the elements that we were shown. So we open up with John Walker running away after he's murdered Flag Smasher guy whose name I don't remember. I don't really care. I don't think anyone does. And he's still struggling to deal with that and the death of Hoskins. He gets confronted by Bucky and Falcon. Falcon tries to give him an out, heat of the battle, as if that's an excuse, but he gives him that. But then he demands the shield, which, this is one of those things where unfortunately Falcon is kind of a dummy in this entire show, which we'll get into. why he doesn't need Walker to do that, to give himself up or to go with them. That's completely unnecessary. But of course, it triggers him. We get a fight. Walker loses. He loses all his fights, so not a big deal. They try to have him be homicidal and try to kill them both. This is really weird. There's no build up to this really. He's threatened to fight Falcon once before, but this idea that he's just suddenly going to murder people that he knows are heroes is pretty counter to his character. And I put that down to sloppy storytelling. I'll get into why they did that, though, when we get into the John Walker story. At any rate, he's defeated. So we transition over to the aftermath, where Falcon, for some reason, has the shield. Now, why does he have the shield? I think the most fans will be, well, Steve gave it to him. What we have to remember is, in MCU context, it's not his shield, it's not Steve Rogers' shield, it's the government's shield. That's why Cap has to give it up at the end of Civil War, and Iron Man has to give it back to him in Endgame, because it's not his. So Falcon has it due to sloppy writing, essentially. There's no reason why he should have it. That aside, Bucky departs to go grab Zemo. He apparently knows where he is. Great for him. Torres says that the mission has moved beyond the duo, but how amazing Kellyman's character is. This is a weird thing. This is picking up Falcon's own narrative too, about how Aaron Kellyman's character is just fantastic. There may have been a version of this show where that made some sort of sense, but in the version that we're getting, this doesn't make any sense at all. She's been kind of an emo kid who murdered people. Threatened Falcon's sister, her family, wanted to kill John Walker, did kill Hoskins, and Torres and Falcon are like, damn, this chick is top notch. Best person ever. It's really weird. You have to kind of have to ignore what's happened in the show, or say that, you know, evil actions are okay if you're a little sad, for that character to work. I don't think she has, but we'll have to see, right? You always have to separate your own response to something from how the public responds to it. So then we transition over to Walker's trial, where he tries to blame them for his actions. This could have been potentially interesting, but I've gone over before that Marvel can't actually really criticize the U.S. military. They have a very good relationship with them. And if you want to have a good relationship with the military, you can't say anything you don't approve of. So this is very weak. Could have been interesting. His wife appears briefly. The actress is, again, boring. I mean, she's not given anything to do, but she does nothing with it. So he's not court-martialed, but he's booted out of the military, and then he's in the courtroom talking to his wife, and we get our episode 5 cameo. This is the thing that the showrunner Malcolm Spellman has been hyping for a few weeks, and people for the most part did not jump on the bait because of how poorly speculation worked out for WandaVision, and thank God they did that, because this is actually incredibly cringeworthy. Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Seinfeld shows up and apparently thinks she's in a comedy. Her performance is utterly ridiculous. No one has any idea who she is. And when I say no one, there are deep cut Marvel fans who know who she is. She's playing Madame Hydra, or at least one version of her, but no casual fan would ever have any idea who the hell she is. She comes across as kind of a cartoon character. It reminded me of Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, where you're like, what in the fuck am I watching? What is this? Is she Bugs Bunny? What are we doing? She's there. Basically says, hey, I would have done what you did. I'll be in touch. And then thank God, she leaves. And so people are wondering, maybe she's a Thunderbolts tie-in. If so, I hope someone gets hold of her and tells her that this is not Looney Tunes, and that especially in something like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is supposed to be a grounded show, running around like Daffy Duck is just not going to work. Now, I have to think most people thought that cameo was ridiculous. It's really hard to imagine that hit it off. I certainly haven't seen anyone talk about how great it is yet. So let's hope that if they keep the actress, and maybe she can act, I don't know, that, we go from 100 down to about 10 for her and we get something more interesting. But if she's meant to be an interesting character, it fails. If she's meant to be a scary character, she fails. If she's meant to be a smart character, it fails. It accomplishes nothing, unfortunately. And then a very short flag smasher scene, which is pointless. Then we go over to Bucky, who's found Zemo, who's at the Sokovia Memorial. This was brought up earlier when Zemo correctly criticized Bucky and Falcon for not caring what happened to Sokovia. Again, really interesting thing you could have dived into. The show touches on a lot of interesting topics and then does nothing with them. So Bucky threatens him in order to show him that he doesn't kill people anymore, which I thought it's a neat looking scene. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Zemo says he doesn't hold any grudges against Bucky, which is interesting. And then he hands him over to the Wakandans. And here we get plot logic slamming into a brick wall. So why do the Wakandans want him? Well, he killed King T'Chaka. So what would you think they'd be doing with him? Taking him back to Wakanda for justice. All right. T'Challa didn't want revenge on him, but he certainly wanted justice for his father. But did they do that? No, they're taking him to the Raft. So for those who don't remember, the Raft is a U.S. facility for superpowered villains. What the hell do you need the Wakandans for to take him there? John Walker would have done that. In fact, offered to do that in the previous episode. So we had our Dora Milaje flipping and jumping around and failing in their mission in order to accomplish nothing. It's really bizarre. And you realize that someone, whether it was Malcolm Spellman, whether it was Kevin Feige, whether it was one of the producers, just really, really wanted the Wakandans to be in this show. And I think you can figure out why they would, but couldn't come up with a reason for them to do it that made any sense. Like, if they were taken to Wakanda, while they still act like morons earlier, they still have a purpose that makes sense. But taking them to the Raft is really bizarre. And there I think you have, someone, maybe Feige was like, yeah, Zemo needs to be in the Raft at the end of this for what we're doing. And they just came up with this stupid reason for it. But anyway, moving on. So we get our second and presumably final scene with Isaiah Bradley. It's possible we'll get a third one in the final episode where his mind has been changed. That's possible. And I think for the show's sake, they're going to need that. And I'll get into why, because of how Falcon's story has not worked as it's been put in. Anyways, though, so he has a pretty long chat with Falcon. He repeats a lot of the things he said the previous time, including blaming Steve Rogers for his fate somehow, which is utterly bizarre, since he would have been in the ice, frozen, and certainly had no control over the U.S. military super soldier serum program. But anyway, that gets steered away, and he again goes back to talk about his past. It doesn't have as many logical problems as the previous one he told when Bucky was there. And I went over before how that whole story just didn't make any sense. The one thing that did work for me in this is when he briefly mentions being experimented on. But they don't go into it. So often with the show, they'll bring up something that could be interesting and they just don't go. He shows some scars and you're like, oh, okay, we're going to get something evocative here. And then it's dropped. And Falcon looks sad, but neither of his encounters with Isaiah has changed his motivation at all. It hasn't affected it. As soon as, and it's the end of the first episode, as soon as John Walker is given that shield, Falcon wants it back because mine. It's like a 2-year-old, Daddy gave me a toy. No one else gets to play with it. It's really bizarre. You've included this story that's meant to be very evocative. It's meant to be really the only nod to historic racism in the U.S. military and some of the shady things that were done. And you include it, but it has no impact on your protagonist. It's really, really strange. And it's a waste of a nice performance from Carl Lumbly. I think, even if I think his material isn't very coherent, I think the performance it's fantastic. The other funny thing is, Falcon's own, he barely says anything to him, but nothing he says seems to affect him either. It's like two people talking to a wall. It's really strange. We then get a long segment. I actually thought this was longer in the show because it felt like it took forever. But our first interaction with the boat. So we remember in episode 1, Falcon's sister Sarah wants to sell the boat to solve financial problems. Falcon's like, no, we got to fix the boat. Well, it turns out Falcon was right, even if he couldn't get them alone. They fixed the boat. And even though they don't have the money, the neighborhood comes together and fixes the boat. We have Bucky showing up to help fix the boat. He's brought with him a suit the Wakandans have made for Falcon, although he doesn't open that until the end of the episode, and we won't see it until episode 6. Even though this section's only about 7 minutes long, it feels interminable. While people complained about the pacing of episode 1, I actually thought it was fine. I like character building moments. I like narratives that take time to indulge, do some dialogue, build character. That's all fine. This, on the other hand, though, just felt like bloat. It just didn't really accomplish anything. We then get a brief scene with Walker talking to Hoskins' family, and this was a strange thing. It made sense for him to talk to the family since Lamar was his best friend, but why does he lie to them? He hasn't lied really in the entire show. That's not part of his character, and the show doesn't bother explaining it. I think the show just on a meta level is like, well, he's the bad Cap, so of course he would lie, and so it's not. And I mean, what would be the point of it either? I guess you could argue, well, he doesn't want the family to have him run off on a vengeance tear, or he doesn't want to admit he killed the wrong person. You could go either way, but neither of them particularly match what we've been told about the character, so it's not as effective as it could be. We then have a brief scene where Sharon Carter's talking to Batroc. It's quite possible this is reshoot stuff. It's a good argument to be made. This whole Power Broker plot was inserted at the last minute to replace the virus plot. But anyways, it's not particularly interesting other than she's got Batroc out of prison. Then we get a brief more boat stuff along with Falcon's nephews playing with the shield, which deflates the power of Isaiah's story, really. And then we get Falcon practicing with the shield, classic hero montage. Bucky apologizes to him for pressuring him to take the shield and absolves him of what happened with John Walker. This is weird since both of them are very much a primary reason why Walker went bananas. But I guess that would make you feel better in the moment, although it's not played for that. And then Falcon, and this was hilarious to me, he unironically says it doesn't matter what Steve thought. And as I'm going to go over when we go through Falcon's arc, the only thing that seems to matter to him is what Steve thought. But the show apparently is not aware of this. And then Falcon goes back to Bucky's original plot of making amends. And he just gives him the same advice the therapist gave him. There's no development of that. He basically just tells him to do it. Bucky's like, okay. Then more on the boat where Sarah and Sam make peace. And Sarah says, oh, no, basically provides the counterpoint to Isaiah's opinion that he should take the shield. This is pointless, though. Falcon already made the decision. We saw him practicing. This is what I mean. Like, nothing that happens in the show impacts Falcon's decision-making at all, except when someone else gets the shield. It's the only motivator he's got. More training montage. Then we have Batroc showing up with Kellyman, and he is willing to help them in order to be able to kill Falcon. That's his motivation. Now, Batroc has never won a fight in his life in the MCU, and he already got his butt kicked by the Falcon in episode 1. So as a season finale fight, that's not setting up anything exciting since nothing about Batroc has changed as far as we know. Maybe he has the serum. We'll see. So Falcon's buddy Torres knows what the Flag Smashers is. That seems to be his primary role in this, other than like, yeah, Falcon. That seems to be what he does. He knows where they are. We have a tedious GRC meeting that about moving refugees that Kellyman interrupts. And then at the end, the final shot of the episode is Falcon opening up the Wakanda case, but we don't see what's inside, even though we know what's inside. It's going to be his outfit that leaked months and months before the show. So on the positive side, the performances generally excellent. We have very minor exceptions. Dreyfus obviously is terrible. Gabrielle Bindloss, who plays Walker's wife, is bland. And Danny Ramirez, who plays Torres, is kind of goofy. He doesn't really fit the way characters are usually portrayed in Marvel films or shows. He's kind of like a little kid who's like, yeah, Falcon. So that makes him, he's not endearing. He's just mildly annoying and bland. Like, what do we know about him? Nothing. He's only included because he's supposed to be the successor of Falcon, by the way. I did think the show also overindulged the shot of Walker holding the shield up to murder people. Doing that once was cool. Maybe you could have done it twice, but he does it a few times. It's a bit much. Robs the power of seeing it initially. So I brought up that most of the character arcs are wrapped up in this episode. We'll probably see a little bit more in the next one, but I'm guessing our final episode is going to be mostly action. And the only character probably who will get character stuff, we'll see Bucky probably making more amends. If he completes that job, it means Marvel wanted that out of the way before his next appearance. But we'll have to wait and see. So let's go over the obvious. This is not a Falcon and the Winter Soldier show. This is a Falcon show where Bucky is his sidekick. So we have to remember the whole point of this 6-episode arc is Falcon becomes Cap. That was probably the, what when directors came in, or showrunners, came in to pitch for the show. If they did pitch, this was probably directive. This is what we want. And they probably had a few other items. We want to have Isaiah Bradley in there because we want Elijah Bradley in there because just like death and taxes, the Young Avengers are inevitable. So this is meant to be his narrative. And what are his goals? What is he dealing with in the show? Well, one, the identity of Captain America. I thought it was very smart of the show to have him turn it down initially, because then you can kind of go through a transition phase, a phase where he realizes that's an identity he wants. So I like that premise. And the minor one, like the B plot, is the family financial straits. Those are the two things that he has to deal with. So let's deal with the minor one first, the financial stuff. So when we're introduced to this plot, he's like, hey, I'm Falcon, I'll get us a loan and we'll get the boat fixed and we'll get everything sorted out. And that fails. His sister says, well, that's not going to work. And that fails. And his sister, what she wants to do is sell the boat and move on. But she is also wrong, because ultimately the show lets us know, no, Falcon was right. But instead of going to the loan, going for a loan, all he needed to do was ask his friends and neighbors to pitch in, and everything will be fine. This is something that could have been really interesting. The economics of being a hero. It's not something Marvel usually deals with. Comic books in general don't deal with it. It's really complicated. I don't mean none of them do, but it's usually just ignored. Other than a character like Spider-Man or Superman, where their job is integral to who the character is. But typically people are just like independently wealthy, like Bruce Wayne or Danny Rand or whatever. They just don't have to worry about it. So we had some potential to be interesting here. They touched on ever so lightly the issues of getting loans in that circumstance. But ultimately, what does Falcon learn? He learns nothing. He was right the whole time. Should have just prepared the boat and everything will be fine. So nothing is learned there. Secondly, becoming Captain America. What is his journey? So he gives up the shield because he thinks it feels like it belongs to someone else and that no one else can live up to that standard. So what have we seen to change that opinion? What's happened? Well, the shield was given to someone else, as indeed the government could have done at any time, because the ownership of the shield has not yet been changed by the show. And they assign it to someone else because they also value its power as a symbol. And that person goes on to ultimately fail, as indeed they must for the show to succeed. And what does that process bring us? Well, Falcon opposes the idea immediately, even though he has no idea who the person is. He rejects them at every turn. And when they fail, he takes the shield up. Now, what has he been told about it? Well, he's been given this dark backstory. Not about the shield itself, of course, because that was in the ice, but about what the military did to try to replicate another Steve Rogers. And does this impact his decision-making at all? No. So he doesn't reclaim the shield. It's defaulted to him. He doesn't come to a personal revelation about having it. Simply someone else had it, I want it, therefore I take it. I think it's going to be framed, my guess is anyway, because this is just so weak, It's going to be framed that he's like, oh, we need a new symbol. I'm pretty sure that's what Marvel will go with. We need a new symbol of hope. And that's going to be Falcon. And you're like, okay, well, what has Falcon done specifically in the show to illustrate why he's this beacon of hope? What has he done? So what has he figured out? I went through it. He has accomplished almost nothing on his own. If you eliminate the opening montage where he beats up poor old Batroc, that's actually, I'll just go through this. It's worth going through. So finding the Flag Smashers. Well, he's not even aware of them. Torres makes him aware and finds them for him. Great. Then he confronts them with Bucky and has to get saved by Walker and Hoskins, but the group gets away. Then he goes to talk to Isaiah, where he talked about how that has no impact on him at all. I mean, he has some dialogue, but it doesn't affect his choices. Then Bucky is going to be locked away for therapy. Walker gets them out of that. Asks for help a second time, gets rejected for a second time, for no reason at all, really. Bucky then is the one who decides they need Zemo. Zemo gets them to Madripoor, and then Sharon Carter completes her arc there. He lets Zemo kill Nagel, and then it's Zemo who gets them back to the Flag Smashers. His response to Kellyman becoming a murderer is, she's great. When Walker requests Zemo is returned to custody, which is not only what is supposed to happen generally, it's actually what the Wakandans do in the next episode. He's refused. This causes a fight to break out, which helps push Walker over the edge to taking the serum. When Kellyman threatens his sister and kids, Falcon is like, she's great. When fighting with her and her cronies results in Hoskins' death and Walker losing it, his reasoning with Walker is to take the one thing that matters to him most, which is pretty stupid. You know, you could have just asked him to come with the shield, and then the shield gets taken away from him later on. But no, we're gonna have a fight. So he gets beat up. He visits Isaiah again and ignores him. Essentially, what he says. His neighbors solve his boat problem for him. His only action there is to ask. And then once again, to find the Flag Smashers, he needs Torres. See, there's nothing there where Falcon is being smart, where he's winning important battles. Like, let's not forget, it's a phone call to him that blows their cover in Madripoor. He's just not an active participant in his story. And so what that does, subconsciously or not, it just makes you feel like, what has this guy done to earn the thing he said he hadn't earned before? You know, you're supposed to see that process. And I think what we'll see in the final episode is he's going to punch some people and talk about how he's a new symbol, but there's going to be nothing in the show that demonstrates that. I do like the fact that it looks like he won't take the serum. I think that's a good choice. But I always thought that the best choice for him would be I would have had him give up the shield after talking to Isaiah. That's a much more powerful message. Then through the process of the show, you would demonstrate that people still need that symbol, which we haven't seen at all. And that you don't need an official military sanctioned object with a sign on it to make yourself a symbol for people. You could just be Falcon, the guy who does the right thing. You know, you want to see him helping people out in their ordinary lives, making things better. That's the premise of being a hero, not just punching people. We don't see that in any way at all. Falcon's in fact a mercenary. This entire time, he's a paid gun for hire. So you don't see that journey. And then it would have been really interesting for him to accept Isaiah's stuff at first, and then think, well, this is actually too cynical. This is not accomplishing anything to just sit there and say, well, nothing's going to change. And so, I, as Falcon, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to be the better person. I'm going to provide that hope for people. That was kind of what I was hoping. Something along those lines was the story I was hoping we were going to get. And I would have had him reject the shield entirely. Now, I realize the MCU would never, ever do that. It's too important to them for him to get that. That's one of those little boxes they want to tick off. But I thought, even then, even if you get him the shield, I don't think it's as strong a message, but you could say, okay, to be the symbol of hope. Maybe I do need the shield. I still just thought that would have been a more interesting story to tell. But yeah, Falcon is largely a passenger in his own story. It's his friends who sort of get things done. And like I said, his motivation to want to be Cap is just so weird. You've got to appreciate it for meta reasons, not what the show is giving you. So those are my issues with Falcon. And that's going to be a lot longer than the other discussions because as the main character, there's a lot more to say about him. As for Bucky, so Bucky is a sidekick here, so we don't expect as much substance for him. The only goal I can see for the character is probably just his amends list to get that over with. Otherwise, nothing has changed for his character at all. Like, we're told that he's suffering from nightmares and whatnot, but this has had no impact on the main plot whatsoever. It hasn't interfered with a fight. It hasn't interfered with his thinking. Not at all. Unlike Falcon, he has made a few active choices, like recruiting Zemo, making the deal with the Wakandans. So not only is his Sebastian Stan's performance better than Anthony Mackie's, but his character feels stronger because he's been a more active participant in his story. The downside of Bucky is his logic for rejecting Walker, and he does that at hand, right? He doesn't know the guy at all. His logic is, well, if Steve is wrong about the shield going to Falcon, he might be wrong about other things. This is so dumb. I don't believe Bucky is this stupid. Like, logic does not work that way. It's like, what if Steve, told you he liked a sandwich a certain way, and then you found out he didn't? What, that invalidates all the other things he's told you? It's a really dumb reason to reject Walker, and it's written in to service the overall plot. They need to reject Walker because Walker can't be Captain America. It has to be Falcon. This is terrible writing. You can have a show where you understand the goal is to get Falcon the shield and do it in a better way. Regardless, it's, his arc is less, it fails less because it's not trying to do as much as Falcon. There's not as much weight put on it. So John Walker, I think this is the most compelling character in the series, even if in the current episode we see some steps back in the writing. And this is odd because I expected them to make him a kind of a pseudo-fascist clown so that accepting Falcon as Cap would be easier. And they didn't go that way. Probably, I would guess, well, for two reasons. One, it's likely they want to use Wyatt Russell again as U.S. agent in another series, so he can't be that bad. And two, the military might not have wanted a military hero to be portrayed in a negative way. That is speculation on my part, so take it with a grain of salt. So what do we know about him? What has the show shown? Not said about him. What has it shown? So he's married to his high school sweetheart with a limp, barely appearing performance from Bindloss. We're never told anything about his family. We don't know if he has one, what they're like, nothing. So the ephemeral role to his wife is a non-existent role for everything else. We're told he's a military hero and that he's given the Captain America role largely because of that. In theory, the government could have given it to anyone, so presumably they chose him because of his qualifications. And he wants it. He thinks that what he accomplished as a soldier wasn't worth that much, and that to provide people hope to do good things, having the role of Captain America was the best way to do that. So his goals are honorable and good. We're told he has a temper, and that he likes to punch his way out of problems. And this is carried through throughout the show. It's well done. It's good to anticipate it, and it's properly seen throughout. He does have a temper. He does like to resort to punching. So he and his best buddy Lamar Hoskins save our heroes from the Flag Smashers initially. They ask for help. They're rejected. He then frees Bucky of his therapy obligations. He asks for help again, is rejected. This time he tells them to stay out of their way. And indeed, while he doesn't have to be belligerent about it, certainly in terms of the legality, he actually has the right to do the things that they're doing freelance. He correctly deduces the best way to find the Flag Smashers is to follow the heroes. He also correctly deduces the heroes are the ones who broke Zemo out of jail. So he's smart. They successfully find the heroes, and thus learn where Kellyman is. He wants to arrest her immediately. I mean, obviously, she's just killed people. Falcon wants to talk first. He's dubious because he knows how PTSD can affect people. He gives Falcon a deadline. When the time comes up, he shows up. She escapes. He, rather than the heroes, then finds Zemo, recaptures him, gets hold of a vial of serum. He demands Zemo to be returned to him, which again, legally, that's his right. Instead, they refuse. He offers to fight Falcon for him, so a sign of his temper again. Instead, the Wakanda show up and beat up everyone, letting Zemo escape because the Wakandans are dumb. He then asks Hoskins afterward if he would take the serum. Hoskins says, absolutely, and so should you. You always make the right decisions. That right decision thing is the one thing that we're told by a character in the show that doesn't really pan out in his performance. So off screen, he takes the serum. Doing that off screen, by the way, I thought was a bad choice, and I think that's down to runtime. And then they go try to find Kellyman. A melee breaks out. Hoskins is ultimately killed. Walker goes bananas, tries to get her, instead kills someone else that we don't care about. In the aftermath, he's confronted by the heroes, and he sounds amenable to going with Falcon and Bucky until Falcon asks for the shield, which obviously he doesn't want to give up. This is his item of hope, his totem for hope. His friend has now died for it. So it's a dumb idea, because Falcon is dumb in this show. He loses the fight, gets dismissed from the military. Daffy Duck shows up, goes woohoo, runs around for a while, goes away, and then he goes to the Hoskins family and lies. We don't know if that's for their benefit or for his. In either case, it doesn't feel very organic to the character. But this is a fantastic character arc. You know, characters are more interesting when they fail and have to overcome it. I've mentioned this a number of times. You think about iconic characters. They're all dealing with loss and failure. You know, Batman's parents die, Spider-Man's uncle is killed, etc., etc. They're overcoming tragedy. There are things that they need to do. I mean, Superman's world dies and he's orphaned. You know, this is part of what gives them emotional weight. And so Walker has that, and unfortunately nobody else on the show really does. They have it on paper for Kellyman, but because we're so little invested in what she's doing, it's also vague. We spend so little time with her, and the person who dies was basically cut from the show. You can't feel that sympathy. You're told to, but it's not there. And she seems quite gleeful in murdering and threatening people, so that undercuts the struggle that she's supposed to go under. So yeah, so Walker, it's an A+. He's the best thing about the show. It's unfortunate that he's probably gone from the show, except maybe a post-credit scene. Although I think Daffy Duck sort of fulfilled the requirement for that. He's not jailed though, which is interesting. He is free. He's just out of the military. So next character, Zemo. So Zemo is unchanged in Civil War, which is interesting. When he's freed, he's following the same mission. He kills Nagel to prevent more super soldiers from being made. He thinks Kellyman has gone too far now and also needs to die. Perfectly fits his character. He's happy that Falcon doesn't want the serum. He challenges them on that. He says he doesn't. And he has no issues with Bucky because Bucky was forced to. And he believes Steve Rogers is the exception that proves the rule about the serum. He's actively involved in the plot. He gets them to Nagel. He helps them find the Slag Smashers. He successfully escapes both from the heroes and from the Wakandans. So he's shown to be very competent. More competent probably than any other character in the show, which is interesting. And he also makes a number of insightful comments about the characters, which unfortunately aren't followed up on much. He very rightly criticizes the duo for paying no attention to Sokovia after Age of Ultron, that should be a pretty powerful moment, although it's not really played that way. He also makes fun of Falcon a couple of times for his assumptions as an American, which I enjoyed. And then he's given to the Wakandans to go to the raft. Just super weird, but that's not on him. That's just where he winds up. So that's where he's going to be. Hopefully they use him again. Daniel Bruhl is such a good actor. Isaiah Bradley. So they used him far less than I thought. I'm not going to repeat the logic problems about his interaction with Bucky in the past and how that doesn't make any sense. What's interesting to me is, while his tragedy, his emotional arc is how he was treated, he never objects to the idea of being given the serum. He's not opposed to that at all, apparently, which I thought was really interesting. Zemo, of course, thinks super beings are they're just problems. Ultimately, the damage they can cause is far outweighs any good they could potentially do, and certainly the evidence supports that, even if his actions to address it are obviously morally and ethically incorrect. But yeah, Isaiah is his main thing is less. It seems like he would have been perfectly content if he'd simply been asked and then gone on to be a superhero in the 50s, which is fascinating to me. I would think it would be much more interesting to delve into the problems the serum caused and, outliving people that he knew, because we know it gives long life, etc., etc. That would have been more interesting. But instead, they just went over, a lack of consent and then how he was treated afterward. Whether they did that for time or for some other reason, it is hard to say. The performance is very good. But yeah, the lore associated with him, unfortunately, the stuff with Bucky is nonsensical, so that's unfortunate. I do think Marvel will be quite happy to ignore that, though, so it's not the end of the world. Sarah, very minor character. All we can say about her is her arc is financial stability, and Falcon solves it for her, ultimately. He's wrong initially, but ultimately he's right. So she really only services. Falcon's going to be okay. He has a sister, and she's very briefly used as a plot element for Kellyman, although Falcon would have met with her anyway, so it's superfluous. So has the show succeeded in making the case for Falcon being Captain America? No. Not to me anyway. Not on a holistic story level, no. On an emotional level, you might think, yes, this has succeeded. We've seen Falcon there with the teary eyes. We've seen some tragic backstory. There's been fisticuffs. The Walker guy failed. Bucky keeps saying he's nuts. And so that works. But really, to me, he seems exactly in the same place as when Steve Rogers is sitting on that bench and hands him the shield. To me, nothing has really... He has not been involved in the decision to take that shield. He simply... It boils down to basically just doing what he was told. And this is really sad. Now, for movie fans who aren't watching the show, none of this will matter at all. And maybe that's part of why his story is less evocative. But yeah, it was constructed in a really weak way, and it's quite disappointing. The social commentary in the show is ephemeral. That's always what you should expect from Marvel. Marvel likes to play it very, very safe. These shows, these films are made for everyone, so you're only going to get really lip service. We saw that in Captain Marvel. I think this is a little stronger than Captain Marvel, but it's still weak and it doesn't take you anywhere because no one changes decisions because of it. Well, I did have one thought sort of related to it. So we were introduced to, I think, is it Eli Bradley or Elijah Bradley? I'm blanking at the moment. But anyway, the young Avenger who becomes Patriot. I'm wondering if they're going to keep that. Obviously the character is going to appear, but whether he'll be Patriot. I've talked before about how derivative characters rarely work. And if you include him as Patriot and John Walker as U.S. Agent, you have three. Falcon is talking is hard. Successor character to Steve Rogers. And then you would have U.S. Agent, who's derivative, and Patriot, who's derivative. I don't think you can get away with that. That's too much of the same thing. Kevin Feige doesn't like repetition. So I wonder if they're going to have a different role for Isaiah's grandson. I don't know, but it's food for thought. Finally, sort of a summation. So I've been saying for 4 episodes that this is a better show than WandaVision despite its problems. This is the first episode where I'm actually not sure that's the case. I think failing with your main character is a big enough problem that maybe it's not as good. It had that potential, but I think WandaVision might actually slightly be better. We still have an episode to go, so there's still a chance for my opinion on that to change. We could still get some really epic, interesting scenes that could really help. Bucky's story still has to wrap up. But I feel like given the quality of storytelling so far, to expect that is just optimism, and so I don't. I think this is ultimately going to be a show that had a lot of potential, but the writing just let it down. And when I say writing, I don't mean, the dialogue, but I mean the story structure. Like, what the hell's up with Sharon Carter? I saw someone guess she was a Skrull, and I hate the whole Secret Invasion Skrull thing. I think that's goofy, but for that character's sake, I kind of hope so, because her character's been pretty strange in this series. But yeah, that's my opinion. Yours may very well be different. If so, please let me know. Let me know what has or hasn't worked for you, and why. I'm always curious. In terms of data of how it's been received, it's too early yet. In terms of Google Trends, we saw a bounce in the worldwide response to it. Well, the US response was about even, but activity doesn't necessarily indicate approval or disapproval. The final episode of WandaVision had the most activity on Google Trends, and ultimately that show has done this in terms of interest. So we'll have to see. Yeah, ratings for it will be weeks away, like proper numbers. But yeah, it'll be interesting to find out. At any rate, I've talked more than enough about this. Next up for me is hard to say. I have like half a dozen things in the hopper, but keep an eye out. More videos and articles are coming. And until then, I hope you are all well, and we will see you next time once I find my mouse.